Anger management. I hate Clive. His smug lopsided grin, his greasy comb-over, his horn-rimmed glasses, I don't think I'd break if I saw him crossing the street. In fact, I fantasize about it every time I sit down in his office. Third time this week, huh? He asked me. It's not my fault, I said. I gave Robert every chance to back down. He's the one who should be in here, not me. He's not the one who punched a dent in someone's car. Of all the things I hate about Clive, nothing compares to his title as Human Resources Director. I wonder if he ever had sex, or if inconveniencing my life was the only thing he needed to get off. I apologized already, okay? Can I go back to work now? I can't just keep letting these incidents slide, Clive said, pressing his glasses into his face like he was trying to glue them on. This is going in my quarterly report to management. My fantasy of hitting him with the car now included a section where I back up once or twice. I clenched my fists, took a deep breath, and counted off a full 10 seconds in my mind. Getting written up would jeopardize my shot at the branch manager position. I didn't waste 4 years of my life in this shithole just to stay in sales. As much as it hurt, I was going to have to suck up to this beanbag masquerading as a human being. You're right, you're absolutely right, I replied. I was in the wrong there. Even though he was in my parking spot, I shouldn't have punched his car. I know I have a problem, and I've started taking an anger management class. It's going to help and this won't happen again, so please give me one more chance before you report it. Good for you, buddy. Buddy. Call me that again, and I'll jab my pen in your neck, buddy. I smiled. I'll tell you what, he added. Give me the number of the place you're meeting at, and I'll check in with them. If they think you're showing signs of improvement, I'll keep this out of your report. Shit. Now I'll actually have to go to a class. My mouth hurt from smiling so hard. Sure thing, buddy, I said. I don't have the number with me, but I'll bring it in tomorrow. I opened the door and immediately shut it again. This couldn't be the anger management class I found online. There was incense burning in there, and drums like some kind of freaking hippie circle. The door opened, and an old Asian man blended into the doorway. I felt a certain tranquility just from looking at him. He wore immaculate ceremonial robes like some sort of priest, and his snow-white hair cascaded down his back in gentle waves. He bowed low to me, his body curving with a supple grace which utterly belied his apparent age. Hi, is this where the United Way Anger Group meets? Welcome, kind sir. My name is Ikari, and it is so good to see a man such as yourself so in command of his own destiny. Won't you please come in? There weren't any corny brochures with perfect models saying anger gives you ulcers. No dolls for me to be nice to, no punching bags to vent on. I don't really know what I was expecting, but it definitely wasn't this. The website said 6:30. Where is everyone? I asked. There weren't even any chairs in the small room. 2 cushions were placed on the ground between a pair of bonsai trees, and Ikari sat down on one to face me. No others, only you. I do not need groups, because those who seek my help must only ask once to be saved. I don't need saving, okay? I was starting to feel uncomfortable. The website looked legit, but this guy seemed more like a cultist than a therapist. What if he didn't have the right accreditation or something? I could be wasting my time. I handle my own issues just fine, I added. All I need is for you to talk to the HR director at my work and tell him, whatever, tell him I'm master of my destiny or something. I already paid online, so are we good? We are far from good, for we are each imperfect beings inflicted with the human condition. Do not worry though, you will soon be better. I checked my watch. Tight smile. Can someone sprain a muscle from forcing too many of those? It felt like it. I sat cross-legged on the available pillow, and tried not to swear at the awkward position. Fucking shit. Oops. Oh well, he already knew I had an issue. Sorry. Don't you have a chair? Ikari just smiled, but his was nothing like my smile. His bubbled straight up from the warmth in his heart. It was patient and wise, almost as though he was reading straight from the divine playbook of the universe and knew everything was following the script. Do you know why there is suffering? Ikari asked. The measured tone made me pretty sure he wasn't talking about the lack of chairs. Because we're all evil sinners who deserve it? I asked. No one deserves to suffer, Ikari replied. But we do, because we each carry a demon in our hearts. Anger, jealousy, hatred, misery, these are ways we feed our demon. And do you know what happens when we've fed it for too long? I shook my head. My demon must be pretty full by now. Ikari leaned in close to me and whispered, "Gobble gobble gobble. It eats us right up." The way he said it made me shudder. It was like he was satisfying a greedy pleasure just from speaking the words. I felt immense relief when he settled back into his own cushion before continuing. Eventually, our demon becomes stronger than we are, and it gets to be the one on the outside. Who we are, who we were, that gets locked away. And unless someone tricks the demon into eating kindness, gratitude, patience, and other virtues, we will never become strong enough to wrestle the demon back down. So how do we stop feeding the demon? I asked. You take away its food. Ikari produced a small wooden jewelry box, every inch of which was engraven with Japanese lettering, and you put it in here. Have a bad feeling? Write it down on a piece of paper, slip the paper through this hole in the top. Angry at someone? Give it to the box. It won't be long before your demon begins to starve. Every problem can be solved by simply putting it in the box. And that's it. I won't be angry. I was trying really hard not to laugh at him. And I shall tell Mr. HR that you are all better. Ikari smiled and handed me the box. Only one more thing, you must not ever open the box, or gobble gobble gobble. Your demon will feed again. What a load, right? But that was easier than sitting through a bunch of dumb meetings. I would have just thrown the box out right then, but Ikari might check it later to see the notes I'd put in. When I got home, I figured I'd just get it all out of the way at once so I wouldn't have to think about it. I grabbed a notebook and tore out a couple dozen pieces of paper. The feeling when I'm stuck going 5 miles per hour on the freeway. Slip. Clive's everything. I hate him so damn much. Slip. People who kick dogs. I wish they'd kick Clive instead. Slip. The more I wrote, the more ideas began flooding into my head. Everything I could think of that pissed me off started cramming into the box. People who steal parking spaces, fuck you Robert. The taste of orange juice after brushing your teeth. Every girl who has ever given me that, it's not you, it's me, shit. The box didn't look that big, and I expected it to only take 10 minutes to fill. 3 hours later though, I had emptied an entire notebook, and still couldn't feel the paper inside. But do you know what I did feel? Like a motherfucking Buddha. It seemed absolutely ludicrous that any of those things have ever bothered me before. Poor Clive, just trying to do his job. Why did I have to give him such a hard time? And Robert should have my parking spot near the door. He was older than me, and I didn't mind the exercise. So how in the world did I get to the point of punching a dent in his car? I've never slept so well in my entire life. I'm usually tense and unable to find a comfortable position, but 5 minutes after I lay down, I was sound asleep. I did have one troubling dream though. There was a soft light coming from inside the box on my night table. In my dream, I got up to reach for it, but then I heard something inside of it scream like a man who has been pushed past the edge of breaking. I opened the box to see what was making the noise, and then gobble gobble gobble. I woke up to the freshest, most miraculous morning I could remember. The last 2 weeks were perfect for me. I worked tirelessly, unfettered by the daily aggravations which I used to spend half the day obsessing over. I started bringing the box to work just in case something came up in the day, and things always came up. No point in risking my promotion, right? The box went everywhere with me. The sound of dry erase markers on a whiteboard. Slip. Suddenly the morning meeting was bearable again. Hey, did anyone hear that? Mr. Ellsworth turned away from the whiteboard to address the assembly. Something like a scream. A collective shrug, and sip of coffee. I thought I'd heard it too though. The moment I slipped the paper in, there had been a soft flash of light and an echoing scream. Clients who think they know how to do my job better than I do. Slip. Having to wear a tie all day. I could strangle someone with this tie. There it was again. It started out as a low moan, but rose into a gurgling scream after I had slipped the second note in. I glanced up to see Clive standing outside my cubicle. What? What are you doing? What do you want? Just looking at him made me agitated. I wanted to let you know that I called Mr. Akari, and he said you showed a complete turnaround. As long as nothing happens before tomorrow, your report is going to be clean. Congratulations, buddy. When people I hate call me buddy, Clive again. The box screamed. It was louder this time. Clive had already gone, but someone was going to hear it if I kept this up. This was the second note I'd had to use for Clive too. I guess some hatred is too deep to extract all at once. Worse still, the moaning continued even though I wasn't putting anything in now. It sounded like the lamentations of a dying man. I shut the box in my drawer, but I could still hear it groaning away. Then a soft rattle. I opened the drawer, and saw the box trembling as a frightened animal. Well shit. I couldn't just throw it away. I had to get my anger out somehow, or that promotion was gone. I couldn't keep it here either though, because someone was going to. What's that sound? Is that the pipes? I didn't answer them. I didn't look at them. I walked fast through the building with the box in my pocket. The warehouse, it's always noisy down there. If I hide the box, then no one will hear it, and I can still get down to slip a note in if I need to. The sound of forklifts backing up. The restaurant which always gets my lunch order wrong. It was 4:30 now. Only half an hour to go and I was in the clear. I was walking down to the warehouse to slip my last note of the day into the box. Mr. Ellsworth keeping people till 5 even when there's nothing to do. I opened the crate of printer paper where I'd stored the box and reached around. Odd, I usually could hear the screaming when I was this close to it. Especially now, since the machinery was all quiet after the warehouse workers left for the day. It wasn't there. I practically dove into the crate, but my box wasn't anywhere. It was only half an hour though, right? I could make it happen, but no. Without the box, the anger would still be there. Even if I did get the promotion, I'm sure Ellsworth would notice sooner or later and bump me back down. It wasn't fair. I'd put in the work, I was better than any of them. It wasn't right for me to keep getting passed over just because, scream. There it was. What started out as a horrible sound now filled me with relief. It was the next sound which I dreaded more. What in God's name are you doing in there? I pulled myself out of the crate to face Clive. He was holding my box in his hand. And it was open. Give it back. Now, I snapped. It's mine. But he was reading my notes. Those were personal. He had no right to. Is this some kind of joke? Clive asked. Why is my name in here? And such rude language. You want language? Give me back my fucking box. My last note of the day was crumpled up in my hand. I was seeing red. I wanted to grab him by the throat but no. I needed that promotion. I couldn't lose it now. I'm sorry, Clive. It was just an assignment from anger management class. It's supposed to be confidential, so give it back. This doesn't need to change anything with your report. My report? Clive practically shrieked. You're still worried about your promotion? You aren't going to have a job at all after this. If this is how you really think, then we have no place for you. I punched him across the face. I didn't want to, but I couldn't stop myself. All the little frustrations and pent-up anger from the past 2 weeks were flooding back. I hit him for every day this company has stolen from my life, for every promotion which passed me over, and for every lonely night I sat at home too tired from work to go out. I pummeled his face into a pulpy mess, and still couldn't get enough. The box was screaming like a banshee, convulsing on the floor where Clive had dropped it. I couldn't tell how much of the blood on my knuckles was his, and how much was mine, and I didn't care. As good as it felt to be at peace with myself, this felt better. At least for a little while, until Clive stopped moving. I dropped him back to the warehouse ground. The screaming, it was driving me crazy. I tried to stuff the scattered papers back into the empty box, but they wouldn't fit anymore. They spilled out over the ground, covered in my bloody fingerprints. How did I let this happen? What would Ikari have done? He said any problem could go away if I put it in the box. Well shit, Clive was a problem, and now he was going in a box, but that only made things worse. I stuffed his body and the bloody papers into one of the warehouse crates, mopped up as much of the blood as I could, and ran. Open up. Open up, old man. I was back at the anger management class. If this was anyone's fault, it was Ikari's. He must have known what the box did, or he never would have given it to me. He must know how to make things right. He had to. The door was unlocked, so I went in. Ikari was sitting on his cushion across from a middle-aged woman. I didn't want to involve anyone else in this, so I waited in the corner for her to finish. She handed a box which looked just like mine to Ikari and thanked him. She was so grateful. It changed her life. Well, good for fucking her, because it ruined mine. Please have a seat, Ikari said after the woman had gone. It was opened, I blurted out. Not by me, somebody else, and they're dead now. This isn't my fault, so you gotta help me fix this. I understand, he replied gravely. Then he leaned in real close, so close I wanted to hit him, but I held myself back, and he whispered, "Gobble gobble gobble." I actually pushed him back into his seat. Don't give me that shit. You must know what happens. Why do you do this to people? A slow smile crept across his peaceful face. Because I am so hungry. And all the hate they pour into their boxes returns to feed me. But you have already let your demon out, so what am I to eat now? The dead man in the warehouse was suddenly the least of my problems. Ikari was standing, although for some reason I never remembered watching him rise. Then he was behind me, not having touched the intervening space. I was absolutely speechless. I backpedaled until my back hit a wall. No, not a wall. He was behind me again. His arm wrapped around my neck, his long nails digging into the side of my throat. When I look at you, all I see is a demon now, he said. All I can see is your selfish hunger. I didn't dare speak. Even swallowing was enough to push those nails deeper into my skin. I strained against his implacable grip with my hands, but with every motion, the puncture became deeper. His arm constricted with the relentless predatory pressure of a boa constrictor, and I was utterly helpless in its grasp. But your demon has already fed on my meal, so here is what you must do. Find those like yourself with anger burning in their hearts, and collect it for me as I have done with you. Twice each month you will bring me a new box filled with hatred or. He didn't need to finish the sentence. Gobble gobble gobble. The pressure slackened just enough for me to nod. Maybe someday I will learn how to trick my demon. Someday I will learn how to be kind, even with this hatred burning in my chest, and I will lock him away. Someday I will learn to control my anger and not the other way around, but until then. Would you like to stop feeding your demon? You only need to ask once for me to save you. Next story. The Masked Orgy. College is the time for experimentation. And no, I don't mean titrating sodium hydroxide with hydrochloric acid in chemistry. I mean forcing yourself to try new things, things that excite you, things that scare you, for how else are we supposed to discover who we are and what we're capable of without constantly pushing the boundaries of our reality? At least, that's the excuse my boyfriend Mike came up with when he suggested a threesome. Sure, I replied. Really? Wow, okay. You're the coolest girlfriend ever. What's the other guy's name? I knew what he meant, but I still enjoyed watching him choke on the soda he was drinking. Mike had been talking a lot about Amy since she joined our lab group in anatomy. I was jealous at first, but after checking out the competition, I had to concede his point. It was hard not watching the supple curves of her body every day as she stripped her sweater over her head to put her lab coat on. I guess I was just relieved Mike was talking to me about it instead of doing something with her behind my back. He wanted me to broach the subject with her because according to him, it sounded less creepy coming from a girl, so I invited her to join Mike and I for drinks after class. Have you ever done anything with a girl before? I asked Amy after our third beer. Mike spluttered in his drink and excused himself to go to the bathroom, and I almost threw the rest of my glass after him. This was his idea. It wasn't fair making me do all the work. Luckily, there wasn't much work that needed doing. Not yet, she replied, a smile playing around the corner of her lips. 2 hours later, all of us were in my room trying to figure out how one person fits in a dorm room bed, let alone 3. It was exciting for me, and I can only imagine how many flashing lights and alarms were blaring inside Mike's head, so I guess it was understandable that he spent most of the time focused on Amy. Besides, Mike and I were already comfortable with each other, so it was really just her that he felt the need to impress. Afterward he said it wasn't the case, but I still remember spending way too long hanging out and watching them go at it. I even left to use the bathroom at one point without either of them noticing I was gone. I didn't want to get mad. I had agreed to this after all, and I hated the idea of being one of those infamous girlfriends who said one thing and did another. I just wanted to get even. It didn't help that he started acting cocky afterward, as though that experience made him a big man or something. He even started pointing out particularly geeky-looking freshmen and saying things like, I bet he's never even been with one, let alone 2. Although asking for another guy started out as a joke, I started pushing for it more seriously. I wanted him to feel what it was like to be jealous. I wanted him to appreciate what I had done for him, and realize I was the only one of us who had the power to make it happen again. And yeah, if I'm being honest, maybe I even wanted to humiliate him a little so he'd go back to regular old Mike and drop this macho facade. We started having fights about it, and the more he said no, the more one-sided our relationship seemed. I told Amy I thought I was going to have to dump him. She and I still hung out sometimes, although I never invited Mike when we did. I told her it wasn't her fault, but she still felt guilty about getting between us, literally. That's why she came up with a solution. I know a place where they do it in a group. You'll get your kinks out, he'll have someone of his own to have fun with, and everyone is wearing a mask so nobody gets hurt. Big rubber animal masks. Didn't it get hot in there? I felt more than a little exposed wearing my stupid Mardi Gras mask I picked up at the dollar store on the way here. Everyone else's mask was hyper-realistic and covered their entire head, but they told me not to worry about it and just relax. Mike and I were just initiates on a trial run anyway. If we decided this was our thing and we respected all of their rules and members, then they'd give us a full mask next time. At first I stuck pretty close to Mike, and we just fooled around with each other and watched. There was about a dozen people in total, and the teeming mass of bodies was pretty damn intimidating to approach. Several of them had covered their bodies in some kind of paint or oil, and they churned and writhed against each other with an almost animalistic intensity. Everywhere I looked, breasts were heaving, indiscriminate hands clutched and pulled on skin, and bodies lunged hungrily at one another as though nourished by their carnal lust. I was about to call it quits and leave, and a man in a panther mask pulled away from the others to approach me. His body was chiseled and slick with paint. Mike and I exchanged glances. "Isn't this what I wanted?" I pointed him in the direction of a leopard mask with fiery red hair spilling out beneath it. He hesitated, so I gave him a little shove. If nothing else, this would be a shared experience we could laugh and bond over, and maybe we'd both be stronger for it. I still shuddered a bit when the panther man put his hand on my shoulders from behind, but his probing fingers expertly massaged down my back and I felt myself melt into his touch. Mike left shortly after that. We'd only been there about a half hour, and I was really starting to enjoy myself, when I saw him staring at me and the panther man. Good, let him see. But then he just turned around and walked away, and my satisfaction quickly drained. I followed him, and we had another fight in the hallway while we were both still naked. He said he couldn't even look at me again after seeing me like that. Somehow the fact that he was more hurt and sensitive than me proved that he cared more about me than I did him, so it was over. He got dressed and left, and I just stood there overflowing with frustration. I felt massaging hands caressing my shoulders again, and I immediately felt the tension flowing out through them. If I was looking for a rebound to get past Mike, then I couldn't think of a more immersive, therapeutic one than this. I allowed the panther man to lead me back into the room. The lights had dimmed since I was gone, but a lot of the paint people wore was glowing in the dark. More hands grabbed me, and I allowed myself to be swallowed up in the psychedelic dance of skin on skin, swirling colors, and the growing moan which encompassed me. As the night went on, the lights continued to slowly dim. The colors grew brighter, and the intensity of the sound and insistence of the sensation mounted into a crescendo of pleasure. I spent most of my time with the panther man, although I allowed myself to be passed from one person to the next without complaint. There was no embarrassment, no judgment, no jealousy, only the acceptance and triumph of our shared celebration of life. I was back with the panther man now, body flooded with gentle warmth and satisfaction. His hands were so powerful yet gentle, and his low moans resonated with my own as though we were a single being harmonized with itself. The thought of leaving here and never knowing who he was, perhaps never even meeting him again, was more agonizing than I could have imagined. I felt an overpowering desire to look at the man pressed against me, just for a second, just long enough to recognize him if we met again. I slid my hands up his neck and tenderly slipped the mask further up his face. But it wouldn't come off. I pulled harder, and felt the strain of living fur beneath my fingers. He grunted in pain, or was that a snarl? And I pushed him off me. Suddenly every sound came to its height, and the mounting carnal cacophony enveloping me became tainted with other sounds. Were those moans? Or was someone starting to howl? And then a yelping joined in. I thought it was a joke at first, but one by one the people began to bray, bark, hiss, or whatever other sound was appropriate to the mask they wore. The panther man knelt upon the ground and I saw his muscles coil as though preparing to spring. It was so dark that I could only see the parts of him covered in paint, and from a few steps away, he looked more like an abstract painting than a man. I ran toward the door, but tripped over a dark form along the way. A multitude of hands clung onto me in the shadows, and then a paw with razor-sharp claws tore the skin on my outer thigh. I screamed and pushed onward, but the grips readily released me as though shocked I wasn't appreciating their touch. I made it to the wall, but I couldn't find the door. The Panther Man crawled toward me on all fours. Some of the glowing paint was on his skin, but more of it was matted in patches of thick black hair on his body. I leaped along the wall looking for the door, ramming against another body and falling to the ground. The half-panther was almost on top of me now, but I couldn't bear to look at him. I closed my eyes and screamed for all I was worth. "Are you okay? What are you doing?" I opened my eyes. The lights were on. Everyone was staring at me. The Panther Man with his chiseled human body was standing over me. He pulled on his furry ear, and I almost screamed again before seeing the rubber mask slide easily off. He was a handsome man, about 30, with strong cheekbones and deep concerned eyes. I ran out the door and dressed in the hallway. The Panther Man started to follow me. "Stop her. She's seen too much," he shouted, his voice a harsh guttural snarl completely unlike the one he used a moment before. A woman in a sheep's mask held him back. "Let her go. She'll come back when she's ready." The voice sounded familiar. Was that Amy? I didn't stay long enough to find out. As soon as my clothes were even halfway on, I ran. "I'm not going back. I can't go back. But maybe I'll have to, because I still need answers." I missed my period the next month, but I tried not to think back to that night. I was on the pill, and they all had protection. Just to be safe, I got a pregnancy test, but it came up negative. I kept testing every month after that. Still nothing. But all the symptoms were beginning to show. I'm swelling up, I'm tired all the time, and nauseous in the mornings. I got an ultrasound, but the doctor said he didn't see anything. It's just like a great, empty pit is growing inside of me. I got a few other scans, but nothing came up, and the doctor just thinks it's a hysterical pregnancy which will pass on its own. I didn't know how to tell him I thought it was something else, just like I didn't know how to explain the claw marks on my outer thigh. I want to forget it ever happened, but it's hard when I keep feeling something scratching me from the inside. Next story. Breaking and entering for dummies. I'm going to tell you a few things about me. When I was a kid, I lost in the finals of a state tennis championship because I told the truth about a line call when I didn't have to. I once climbed a tree to get somebody's cat down, then stayed up there the rest of the night just because it was so peaceful. My favorite food is strawberries and cream, only I don't tell the other guys because they'd give me shit for it. I also joined the 18th Street Gang when I was in the 6th grade. It's important what order I tell you these things, because the moment someone notices my blue and black bandana, they think they already know everything about me. I'm a sophomore in high school now, and last night was my first break-in. Spike, an old-school Mexican mafia type, was there to show me the ropes. He taught me how to map out the regular patrol routes of officers, and how to hide in a concrete drain pipe to avoid being seen. I'd never stolen anything bigger than a candy bar before. I was scared as hell, but I knew Spike was tight with everybody and would tell them how I did. This was my first real chance to let everyone decide what I was made of, and I wasn't going to screw it up. Let's not do this one, it has an alarm system. Middle-class suburban home with a white picket fence, nothing that screamed a good target to me. Doesn't matter when they let you in, Spike said. He grinned. Just because I'm in a gang doesn't mean I understand gold teeth. They're disgusting. But someone's here. There's a light on up there. I protested. Let's keep looking. Maybe if we didn't find a good target tonight, we could just go back and play pool and try again another night. I'd be ready another night. How are they gonna open the door if they ain't home? Fuck sake, he said. Spike walked around the house and turned the garden hose on full blast. He found 2 more taps along the back of the house, and turned those on too. He waited a few minutes for a lake to start forming in the yard before ringing the doorbell. I wanted to stop him, but I was frozen. My heart beat faster with each light that turned on as the resident approached his front door. "Who is it?" someone yelled from inside. "Excuse me, sir," Spike shouted. "I noticed one of your pipes burst. Just thought you should know." The door opened. An old man, at least 80, stood there in his bathrobe. I never want to get that old where my eyes shrink down to little pinpricks and my skin hangs in loose folds like that. Spike gave me a grotesque wink. It did. "Oh God," the old man said. "Yeah, look at all that water," Spike said. I was just walking on the sidewalk with my kid. He wrapped his arm around my shoulder, and I fought the urge to pull away from his sticky sweet odor of dried sweat. "Yo," I said. "We found which one it was, here come take a look." Spike didn't even wait for a reply. I wonder how many times he's done this before. The old man pulled his bathrobe tighter and followed Spike around the side of the house. I wanted to warn him. To tell him to run, to hide and lock the door. I couldn't turn my back on my own though. If this was going to happen anyway, I might as well be the one to return with some glory. The moment the old man passed me by, I picked up a rock from his yard and smashed it straight into his temple. He crumpled to the ground like a bag of dirt. Gold teeth flashed. "Nice one, kid. Now let's drag him inside so we can take our time with the place." I propped him up against the wall in the living room. He was still breathing, but there was a lot of blood coming from his head. I thought about bandaging him up, but I didn't know if that would seem like a sign of weakness. I just wanted to get in and get out as fast as I could. Snarl. Woof 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 woof. "Shit, there's a dog," Spike grunted. The sound was coming from behind a closed door down a few concrete steps, probably leading to the basement. "It can't get at us," I said. "Let's ignore it." "Nah, too much noise." "Quick, go deal with it," he said. "Deal with it?" I didn't want to hear him explain. He didn't say a word, but that flash of gold and the knife he handed me, that was even worse. "Make it quick. You're gonna be a man after tonight." I gripped the knife in my hand so hard my knuckles turned white. I turned away from Spike so he wouldn't see me shaking. "I'm gonna go check upstairs for a safe or something," Spike said. "Or cash under the mattress, these old shits think that's safer than a bank sometimes. That thing better be quiet by the time I get up there." I wasn't worried about it being a big dog. An old guy like this probably had a poodle or something, but hurting any animal has always been off limits for me. Being loyal to my colors over my own instinct, there wasn't any going back from this. I hated myself for opening the door. I was tense and ready for it to spring at me. I even slashed the air with the knife a couple of times until I found the light switch. I didn't see anything but a set of stairs though, so I walked down to find the miserable creature. Snarl. Woof 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 woof. Why is it still barking? I heard from upstairs. I don't know, I shouted back. I was staring face to face with a grown man, probably around 50 years old, stripped down to his underwear, and shackled to the wall with iron clasps around his wrists and ankles. His facial hair was thick and greasy, and it was matted in with the long unkempt black hair spilling from his head. Snarl. Woof woof. The man barked at me like an animal. He pulled against the metal restraints as he tried to dive at me, snapping his jaw and frothing into his beard. Then there was a flash of recognition in his eye, and he pressed himself back against the wall. His mouth contorted awkwardly, almost as though he was trying to say something. "Don't make me come down there and do it for you," Spike said. His voice was closer now, like he was coming back downstairs. I dropped the knife and ran. I don't know what the hell was going on, I didn't care what was going to happen to me, but I could not be in that room. Spike was waiting for me outside the basement. What's going on? Did you do it? I just kept running. Straight out the door. I ran the whole 3 miles back to my house without even stopping. Spike followed me out, I don't think he ever saw the thing. He must have told the other guys though, because I got a 18-second beating for what happened. I took it like a man. I didn't even make a sound. I didn't tell anyone what I saw, or what I heard the thing say as I was leaving. Kill me. Spike was waiting for me when I got off the school bus today. He wrapped his arm around my shoulders and led me away from the other kids. I flinched when he touched me. Last night. He said. I'm sorry. I messed up. It's my fault, I replied. I'd already taken the beating. What more could happen? I get it, first time is scary. But facing that fear, that's what makes a man out of you, he said. I checked up on the house, and there wasn't any police report or anything. The old guy was dead, but nobody's found him yet. Did you look in the basement? I asked. Nah, I didn't stay, but the two of us are going back tonight. We're gonna finish the job. How could I tell him? It would just sound like a lame-ass excuse. He'd just think I was scared, and I'd get beaten again. I just nodded. There wasn't any way out of this for me. I've already killed a man, so what's so much worse about killing an animal? Next story. Like father like son. I have a 2-year-old son named Alexander. No, that's not the horror story, although any new parents out there might beg to differ. He is the most perfect thing I could ever or will ever create, and I love him with all my heart. When I look at Alex, I see myself. An entire lifetime of academic achievements, romantic pursuits, dreams and ambitions, and of course the glorious pride of shooting the game-winning goal. The infinite potential of his unlived life is a miraculous blessing that I am privileged to be a part of. My wife Stacy thinks I'm going to run myself into the ground trying to be the world's best dad. She thinks I'm overcompensating because my own dad left when I was 2. And so what if I am? Dad leaving destroyed my mother. It was because of him that I grew up practically impoverished, withdrawn, and angry at the world. What's so wrong with wanting something better for my own son? I'll admit that I did tend to obsess over the idea though. Everything was a competition. I wanted a better job than my father, to drive a better car. I even started interrogating my mother about all Dad's bad habits so I could avoid them, although she replied with something which shocked me. Why don't you ask him yourself? I know where he lives. I couldn't even remember the man. Learning he lived just on the other side of town made me furious. I had to know what his excuse was for never being there, and even more than that, I wanted to tell him straight to his face that I wouldn't be the same terrible father he was. I was expecting some kind of burnt-out crack den or whore house, not the luxury high-rise apartments that matched the address. Sure, my mother lived comfortably now, but somehow I didn't think he deserved the same kind of lifestyle now. My fist landed on his door with a quick burst of powerful thumps. Who are Dash? The man in the loose bathrobe asked, but he didn't even have to finish the sentence. The resemblance was uncanny. The long nose, the angular cheeks, the wisps at the end of his eyebrows, he looked exactly like an older version of myself. Yeah, I said. All my carefully prepared arguments from the drive over here evaded my mind. All I could think about was how unsettling it felt to look at that face which could have almost been a mirror. Well, all right, come on in. He turned around and sat down on his sofa. Your mother send you? Do you and her still talk? I asked. He shrugged. Sometimes. She told me about your kid. Congratulations on Dash. Why'd you leave? It wasn't supposed to go like this. I was supposed to be gloating over a successful life he played no part in. He was supposed to be pleading my forgiveness. So why did my voice crack like I was the one begging? The same reason you'll ditch your kid, he said. They're better off without us. I left shortly after that, feeling less satisfied than ever. How dare he presume I would make the same terrible decisions he did? Maybe he was right that I was better off without him, but my son needed me and I needed him. I gripped my steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. How could I possibly be bad for my son? I was so focused that I didn't even notice the car cutting me off. Hey asshole! Get off the road! I shouted. I never do that sort of thing, but I was so pissed at my dad that everybody better stay out of my way. Maybe that's what Dad was talking about. If I brought home this kind of anger, then my son would start to internalize it as he grew up. Maybe it was best for me to just stop at the bar before heading home and take some time to cool off. I couldn't sleep that night. Stacy was mad at me for coming home late. She smelled the alcohol on me, but I didn't want to tell her about my dad because I just wanted to forget about him. They're better off without us. Ha! Better off without you. But what if there was something more to it? Maybe my father really knew something I didn't, some inherited health problem, or predisposition to an addiction, or hell I don't know. He didn't seem accusing or angry or anything when he said it. Maybe he was actually trying to warn me. If that was the case, then wasn't I being selfish in putting my own comfort over the security of my family? It was 2 a.m. when I knocked on his door again. He opened it wearing the same disgusting bathrobe. Why are they better off without us? I blurted out. I wanted to cut straight to the point and not give small talk a chance to sap my anger. Come on in, have a seat. I don't want to come in. I want an answer, I said. You smell like booze, he said. So did I when I went home. Your mother couldn't stand it. That was it. He was an alcoholic. Well, I wasn't. Sure, I drank from time to time, but I wouldn't let it ruin my relationship with Stacy like it did with him and my mother. I couldn't stand the sight of him, so I just took off right after he gave me that explanation. But Stacy had been upset when she smelled it, so maybe I could still learn from him. I decided to spend the rest of the night at a friend's house so she wouldn't have to see me like this. I sent her a text to let her know what I was doing and went over to my buddy Tom. He and I stayed up chatting for a while. I had a couple more drinks to help me sleep, and then I crashed on his couch. Between the alcohol and knowing I resolved the issue, I slept like a baby through the rest of the night. I wish I hadn't though, because she was absolutely livid. She wouldn't even let me explain myself. I tried to tell her about my father, but she just thought it was awfully convenient considering I hadn't mentioned him yesterday. The alcohol, the night out, she was utterly convinced I was cheating. I even tried getting her to talk to Tom, but she wouldn't stop yelling long enough for me to get him on the phone. I shouldn't have hit her. I know it was wrong. But I couldn't get her attention, and I was getting so mad at her being mad. Shit, I don't know. It wasn't even hard, I just pushed her away from me and she fell over. I was so embarrassed that I just rushed straight out the door. Where was I supposed to go though? I didn't want to bring my mother in on this. She had to believe I was the perfect son, the perfect husband that my dad never was. The only person who seemed to understand what I was going through, the only one I wanted to talk to, was my dad. Tap tap tap. My knock lacked all of the certainty and power it had the first time around. And yeah, maybe he was just going to say something that pissed me off worse, but maybe he'd also remind me about how much worse of a father he was. Compared to him and everything he's done, I'd be able to look at myself and know I wasn't so bad. Tell me everything, I said. Well, come on in. I don't want to come in. I want to know what made you such a shitty father. We stood facing each other through the doorway. He looked worn out, but I must have too after last night. For a second I thought he was going to just close the door in my face, but then he sighed and said, "I hit your mother. Are you happy now?" "Yeah, what else? I want to know everything." My breath was coming in shallow gasps. There had to be more. There had to be something that made this man worse than me. "Just leave it alone, will you? It's ancient history," he said. "Either come in or leave, because I don't want to just stand here like a couple of dash. I want you to tell me what else you did to us." I shouted. "Yeah, well, know what I want," he said. "I hope when your son comes knocking on your door in 20-some years, you do something I couldn't and break the cycle. I hope you don't answer him." He started to close the door. I tried to push my way in, and the door slammed on my foot. "I'm not you. I'll never be you." He tried to push me back so he could close the door, but I barreled into him and knocked him to the floor. He tried to crawl away, but I straddled him and pinned him to the ground. "Get the hell off me, Dash. Not until you tell me what else made you leave." "It's none of your business, Dash." He tried to sit up, but I forced his head down. Too hard. It slammed into the tile floor with a sickening crack, and a pool of blood began to spread out from the wound. He wasn't fighting back anymore. His body felt limp. "What did you do? What did you do?" I kept shaking him as though that would wake him up, but all I did was smear the blood around. But there. One of his eyes flickered open for a moment. "I swear to God," I said, "if you don't tell me, I'll dash." "I killed a man," he grunted. "After that, I couldn't look you or my wife in the eye, so I left." "Who?" I asked, but somehow I already knew the answer. He had it coming. For leaving my mother. For leaving me. My grip went slack, but it didn't matter. He couldn't stand anymore. I let him slip to the ground and stared at my bloody hands. What son would want a father like this? Maybe he was right. Maybe they are better off without us. Next story. The Organ Harvesting Club. Growing up, I was one of those kids who could be washed with a fire hose and still have dirt between my toes. Mud was the best toy in the world. I used it like Play-Doh to build entire forts, and my twin sister said she could always tell when I was coming before she saw me because of the squelching sound. Bugs? Bring it on. I'd eat one for $1. Painting? My whole body was both brush and canvas. Maybe you'd find me baking a cake with my sister. We looked almost identical, but you could easily tell us apart because she would be wearing disposable gloves up to her elbow, while my whole face was buried in the bowl to lick the batter. That's what makes it so unfair that she got sick and I didn't. It started with her feet and ankles swelling up. I thought she was just starting to gain weight, and I forced her to jog with me in the morning before school. She kept trying to push through, but she couldn't keep up with me like she used to. I shouldn't have made her feel bad for it, but I was only 17 then. I thought she just wasn't trying. I didn't understand that she was trying twice as hard as me, or that trying sometimes wasn't enough. A month later, she could barely walk without throwing up. She was exhausted and dizzy all the time, and I felt so helpless watching her drift away from me. She was diagnosed with a polycystic kidney disease which was causing both of her kidneys to fail. She tried dialysis for a while, but it quickly became clear that she was going to need a transplant. I didn't even have to think about it. She was my other half. If her body was sick, my body was sick, and if there was something I could do to make her better, then that was the end of the discussion. It was just bad luck for her to express the inherited condition while I didn't, and it could have just as easily been me. It was going to be a routine enough operation though, and once she had one of my kidneys, there was no reason for the cysts to form anymore. We were both going to be okay. Yeah, we'd have to be on medications for the rest of our life, but as long as she'd be taking it with me, it would be fair. Besides, what twin doesn't want to have matching scars? We were prepared for the surgery together in the same room. We made a game out of drinking the nauseating laxatives which were necessary before the operation. First one to get through it gets to choose which kidney to have. It wasn't even close to fair because she started out nauseous and I had always been the one who could stomach anything, so I made a big show of spitting it up and let her win. Her gloating about beating me was the happiest I had seen her in a long time. It was so embarrassing because she wouldn't stop giggling while the male nurse shaved the little hairs on our abdomen. I started laughing too, and the nurse looked so uncomfortable that he had to excuse himself from the room to check something. "Come back," she yelled after him. "We can do you next. It'll be fun." Her smile was glowing despite everything she had to go through. I want to always remember her like that. The surgery was terminated halfway through. There had been a complication, and her body had gone into shock the moment her first kidney was removed. They said she woke up for a moment and held my hand right before she went, but they might have just been saying that to try and make me feel better. It didn't work. The doctor said I could see the body if I wanted, but what was the point? All I had to do was look in the mirror. All the pain and loss on my face, hers must have looked the same way. Then the doctor leaned in real close, like he didn't want anyone else to hear, and he whispered something to me. "Since you're all prepared for the surgery anyway, do you want to still go through with it? She's gone. What's the point? There's someone else who is also a match. You could be saving their life instead." What did he think this was, a charity? I wasn't just giving organs away. I was only doing this because she was my sister, and I would have given anything for her. I wasn't about to risk my life for. The recipient is willing to compensate you with $250,000. I choked on my reply. It's amazing how quickly you're able to justify something for that kind of money. I had already been prepared to give it up. Was there really anything wrong with selling it? I would be able to help my family with all the medical costs my sister had racked up from her illness. Besides that, I would be able to help so many more people. I nodded. The anesthesia mask went back over my face, and I slipped back into oblivion. I didn't tell anyone about the money which was discreetly wired into my bank account. There was an unwholesomeness about it somehow, but maybe that was just because the whole incident was so close to my sister's death. I paid off all of my parents' bills and told them they were covered by an anonymous donor, which I guess was true. Over the next 3 years, I funneled the rest into a non-profit organization which helped people get their medical procedures. 3 years. It went fast. I'd expected that kind of money to be able to help people for a lifetime, but people came from everywhere to make use of the fund. Copay for cancer medications, necessary operations which were denied by insurance, health screenings for those without insurance, 3 years, and the entire $250K was spent. But I received so many letters and gift baskets and people hugging me sobbing about how I saved their life. It was a rough estimation, but I figure in that time I saved the lives of at least 30 people. 30 people for a kidney. I was a 20-year-old college girl. There was nothing special about me at all. But knowing that such a small sacrifice had made such a huge impact, I couldn't just stop now. I went back to the doctor who performed the operation, and he confided that there was a constant market for other organs. I asked about harvesting from cadavers or something, but he said only live donations or incredibly fresh harvests would bring that kind of money. Getting volunteers though? Next to impossible. And it was illegal to advertise buying that sort of thing. Even if I managed to raise awareness about it around campus without getting arrested, then people would probably keep the money for themselves instead of helping others. If I wanted my foundation to continue, I was going to need to get the organs myself. It made me angry to even think about how greedy people were. The potential for good each body contained was astronomical. It was selfish, almost criminal, to think that they valued their own life over the lives of dozens of others. I had several meetings with the doctor trying to brainstorm ideas to collect, and that's when he told me a secret which he had sworn to keep for life. The man who had my kidney killed my sister. He'd paid the nurse $100,000 to do it so he could get my kidney instead. The doctor had found out too late to stop him. His own life was even at risk if he didn't extend the offer to me. I finally found the first person to join my organ harvesting club. I tracked him down with the doctor's help and waited for him to come home. Getting in was easy. I just rang the doorbell and he opened it. My plan was just to get information on him and his house on my first visit, but I couldn't hold myself back. His blood was flowing through my kidney. My sister's blood was on his hands. I punched him square in the face and tackled him straight to the ground. He was twice my size, but he was fat and old, and I was an animal. If I had prepared better, I wouldn't have gouged my fingers into his eyes, worth $750 each. I wouldn't have broken his teeth with my elbow, about $1,000, or spilled so much blood when I slit his throat with my switchblade, $337 a pint. I didn't even get his body to the doctor in time to get top dollar on the rest of the organs, but I'll be more careful next time. I expect to get close to $600K for the nurse who killed her. Can you think of any other club which can potentially save hundreds of lives with each new member that's added? I hope my sister is watching somewhere, and that she knows how much good has come from her death. She can stay pure and clean and perfect, but I was never afraid to get my hands dirty.